Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most venison-packed, antler-racked, bullet-impacted, title-hacked, character-jacked, pain-racked, ransacked, foundation-cracked, contract-enacted, least-compacted, fact-backed, second-acted, after-packed, huzzah work as it releases.
Huzzah.
Whoa, bit late on that one.
Sorry,
Elliot Diebold, but I'm Ruben Morehouse.
You've been getting it wrong every week.
I don't think so. I'm improving the rhyming structure of it live.
You absolutely are not. The act sound is much more gooder as a rhyme sound than tud.
No.
Anyway, I'm Elliot Diebold.
I already said my name, so I'm not going to say it again. If you missed it the first time, sorry, you're out of luck. But we are coming to you live here in our little live recording studio with all of our audience members in the Discord. If you want to be one of those live audience members, then you can be one. It's not that hard. All you need to do is go to duffmedia.com/Discord. Sorry, I'm a bit tired today, y'all.
That's fine. What you need to do is just, Ruben, do a fan art of transformation. That's my segue. I stuck the landing.
A terrible segue. You could have said I need to transform into someone that is less tired.
That's what I started doing, and then I changed for some reason.
I thought you were going to go.
I don't know why. Anyway, fan art contest, transformation. I think it was due on the 3rd of February, so there's not that much time. So get scribbling or whatever you call making art.
Or you call it transforming an easel and some crayons into a beautiful picture.
We don't
At least
get
that's
enough.
the way I do it.
We don't get enough crayon submissions, do we?
Have we ever got any?
If I'm trying to think of crayon art, the first thing I'm thinking of is our colored pencil stuff from All Packed Up.
Oh yeah. I mean, that kind of shows like the level of artist that I am. It's like when I think, what do you do to make art? Oh yeah, you take some crayons.
Be better than us.
Speaking of, we're talking about Hard Pass 22.Z today. From the perspective of a bunch of different people. Snowdrop, Avery, Charles, Lucy, Verona. Is there anyone else I'm missing in that?
No, all the heroes of the story, really.
All our favorite characters, yes.
I do. I think it's really fun because there's like just this chapter hits you right out of the gate with that like really kind of confused hype because you're like .z, it's an interlude, but also it says Avery and it's got Avery's banner with her in it. So like you just sort of hit the ground running in this chapter with just like energy. Like it's very and I love that. Like, and because then you sort of slowly learn why it still counts as an interlude because we've got people like Charles and Snowdrop, but from the get-go, this chapter is kind of, and this is the energy that persists throughout the chapter, is this chapter just kind of has you in its grips and just throws you around as it suits it.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the entire arc of Hard Pass has been kind of building up to this chapter, right?
Yeah.
Like we've all kind of known finding out what the deal is with Avery is going to probably be the end of this arc, and it delivers, and it's pretty great.
Yeah, I guess for a chapter that really takes you on a ride, I love how it starts the ride with this roller coaster drop of just, it's an interlude and it's Avery's and you don't know what that means. Fucking deal with it. Figure it out.
Yeah. So obviously this chapter starts with Avery trying to figure out a way out of her situation, but failing, dying, with Snowdrop left in the paths, cut off from her. Cut off, I guess, because she's dead, and left in the paths.
Yeah, and this opening part, I think the thing I most wanted to say about it was just how vivid this description is of like how Avery is coping with being shot. Like the way the throbbing feeling, the way her brain just starts to like, as she like falls into shock and blood loss, like her brain just kind of stops working well and gets like really confused. Like I love all these weird thoughts that she starts having, and she's like, that's not helpful or relevant because like that's. I haven't really been shot, but you know, when I've been stressed, your brain does stuff like that, and I really liked it.
Well, yeah, she's clearly kind of losing her grasp on reality, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of it was Helen's interlude. It was Helen's interlude when she like is about to get forsworn and she gets called into the principal's office or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of vibe of like really losing your grasp of reality that I felt in the first part of this chapter, which is very fun and kind of leans into the terror that you feel at the start of this chapter.
Yeah, Wildbow's just really good at making you feel it. Yeah, and then there's also the bit I just love, like, because the Orum's here and he's just kind of snooping, and I
Yeah.
love the way Avery gets rid of him because he starts talking about how he's technically impartial, and then Avery just tells him to fuck off, which is very much one of those moments where you're like, if Avery's swearing at you, like,
Yeah,
you're in
things are getting
trouble.
bad.
And then, but it then just gets outdone as a line by Snowdrop glaring at him and saying, "Pretty please, sir." And Avery, like, through her connection, feels like the venom in the words. And I love that as a use of Snowdrop's rule of discourse. Like, we've been starved for Snowdrop rule of discourse, jokes and serious bits for an arc, and this one hits the ground running.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about this. Something that we often do when we have a chapter like this that reveals something to us is I go through and I try and figure out what little hints are in there.
Yeah.
Just to be like, how dumb am I? How much should I figure this out? You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100% I do.
So we're at the part of the chapter where Avery pulls her trick here, right? And we find out later, I mean, that we get a specific line that says the exact moment when she's like switched out with a glamour double. I don't know what you want to call it. Where it says Snowdrop had pulled her out and through the door, then did the bracelet back up again, which presumably means went through the door. There's this bit where she like gets pushed through the door by Snowdrop landing on her, but not kind of fully, and then gets grabbed and pulled back out. And that part is described in this section of the chapter. And I was really trying to go through it and find like, okay, is there anything in here that like gives it away? And I really didn't find anything.
No, me either. If I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think I 100% understand exactly how they even pulled this off.
Okay, let's talk about this now because I want to make sure we do understand this, or maybe we can talk about it later when we get to it. But I kind of want to flag it here because it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about.
Sure.
So Avery swaps herself out with a glamour double, right? That is kind of lent playing dead energy from Snowdrop enough so that it is convincing to, to the people who. Like, by the time that her throat is slit, effectively, it's already kind of a fake double, right? And that's...
But, sorry, so when does she switch herself out for the glamour double?
As I understand it, when this bit happens where... So she tries to bring a fake glamour door through from her charm bracelet, that doesn't work. And then she brings out a real door through her gardener's gloves and kind of goes into it a bit. My impression of it was like kind of dangles into it and gets pushed into it by Snowdrop, but then is kind of grabbed and pulled back out of it by one of these goons. At that point, the switch is made, as I understand, right? But I couldn't quite connect it as well. I like what Aziza did. It says in chat. I don't know if this is correct or not, but it kind of makes sense. Saying, I think it's sort of like shedding her skin as Snowdrop pulls her through the open door and the soldier pulls the glamour double back away. That makes a fair amount of sense to me.
Sure. And so then doing the bracelet back up again, that's putting it on the glamour double?
Fake? Yeah, maybe.
Because when I first read that, I'm not going to lie, but I thought for a second was that Avery had like glamoured herself into one of her bracelets.
One of her charms.
Yeah, like I was like, oh, I didn't know she could do that.
Yeah, but she faked her death so strong that nobody could even tell where she was. I don't know. But which I guess makes sense conceptually, because when we found out about like them trying to get Chase or whatever to find her, it was like, it definitely seemed like if she was dead, we would be able to find her dead body. So we kind of knew that something hinky was going on, right? And she wasn't just dead, but kind of was convincingly dead enough.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about that more when the Sable reveals his sneaky tricky.
Well, yeah, we got to talk about that as well, because that also is interesting. But we'll get to that, I guess, later.
That's later. I think the last thing before we move on from this section that I really wanted to call out was I really love how Wildbow throws in the banner.
The empty banner.
Yeah, with Avery. Like, this arc in particular, I think, has been getting a lot of mileage out of using the banners for stuff like this, because it was like 22.2, I think, when we had Verona picture the banner with just her and Lucy. Like,
Yeah.
after sort of slowly training us to really look for these kinds of details in the banners over the last 21 arcs, Wildbow's really kind of having fun with it in this one.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we next jump to Lucy's head, and we're seeing the kind of continuation of the showdown at the church. Or is it even a church? Is it just a building now? I don't know. But yeah, it's that Marisica is continuing to tear down both physically the church and the idea of a church, and Lucy is kind of desperately debating to slow her down here, which is quite fun.
Yeah, I think, like, because it definitely struck me from the get-go that I was like, this feels like a Marisica who is panicking a little bit. Like, she constantly claims that Lucy is, like, flailing and on the back foot, and I just couldn't help but read that as projection, because, like, there's just something really petty, and I would have said beneath Marisica about just, like, trashing bits of it, like, oh, is it the windows and, like, smashing the windows? Like, it just feels tacky. Like, and I know she's not a fairy anymore or whatever, but, like, even if she's meant to be this big, regal, powerful god, there's something really tacky about doing what feels like a 4-year-old tantrum here and being like, oh, it can't be the windows because I smashed the windows. Like, it just, I don't know. I was like, right from the get-go, I was like, something is up with Marisica. Like, she seemed, there must be something that she can't fall back on that she usually has, because this just doesn't feel as in control as she usually does.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I quite got that same vibe here, but I definitely start to get it later as, like, I guess as Lucy is starting to figure out that something's going on as well with Charles and the Aurum not being around.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I guess it's just because even every other time we've seen her since she ascended to her godhood, she's very much just been like
this kind
sitting
of detached god. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, saying stuff, but, like, felt like she had one foot out the door, and, like, she was barely concerned by what was happening in this scene that she was deigning to grace us with her presence in. And this is the first time where she really comes in here, and she's like, it feels like she really needs this win.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe part of it is because that's the image that she wants to convey, is like, I am this unassailable god. But the fact that Lucy is actually here and, assailing her is enough to kind of break that image a bit. And so she really has to be vicious about it.
When she's directly challenging, like, the churches, like, that's the thing.
Yes,
like, if
yes.
if Lucy wins this, Marisica can be pretty fucked, because all of her churches become pretty permanent weak spots.
Yeah. Now, I think there's this very funny moment when Marisica's talking about what makes a church and says, is it the steeple? And she doesn't carry it through and go, open up the doors and hear all the people. But I really thought that would have been hilarious if she had really just launched into the entire here is the church hand rhyme thingy. Would have been good times.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
You don't know? It's the thing where you... Oh my God. Elliot, every time we have one of these conversations, I'm just so floored by some just random gaps in your, like, I don't even know what to call it. You're like life experience, but, like, it's not life experience. It's like experience of things that mean nothing, but somehow you haven't experienced. Anyway.
See, because when you started that sentence, I thought you were going to make a joke about the narthex, which is clearly the most important part of a church.
Yes, okay,
as the New York Times crossword has taught us.
Oh, not the apps. Or that's one of the ones that comes in a lot.
Yeah. Oh, God, there's a few others. Churches have a bunch of really weird specific terms for bits of them.
Yeah. Dumb stuff. Basically, the kind of words that only really show up in crosswords. Yeah, like, I'm about 99% sure an ibex isn't a real animal. It just was made up by Will Shorts so that he can use it to help write crosswords and fill in difficult crosses. Anyway,
and Oreo. They love the word Oreo. That's probably the one of these words that you could expect everywhere. But, like, just
if
all
I
those
didn't
free
eat
vowels.
so many Oreos, then I wouldn't think they were real. But yeah, so I mean, Lucy is doing pretty well here, right? Like, there's this really good moment that I really like where Mariska is trying to get her to say what makes a church, because as soon as Lucy gives an answer, I mean, like, it's an impossible question, right? Like,
Yeah.
defining it by a specific piece of its architecture or whatever is just a trap. And Lucy kind of avoids that really well, and like instead just pushes on, like, you're trying to distract me from the fact that this is referred to as a church and was when you did this thing that you're about to do where you attack Oakham. Like, she doesn't fall for Marcy's tricks here. And I don't know if she would actually fully win this like argument, but it is just enough to buy time. And I think Lucy does incredibly well at that.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the way we get carried through her logic of like she thinks, well, I could argue this or I could argue this, but she can already see the counter arguments. And it's like as soon as she goes through that twice, she's like, I don't want to play like that's playing Maricica's game. Like it feels like it comes back to the sort of stuff Guillermo has been teaching her about how like conversations are a type of duel, where it's a bit like if she engages with Maricica's arguments, she's kind of getting drawn into Maricica's rhythm and stuff. So she just kind of takes that step back and is like, no. The point is you can't just reject sanctuary after we've claimed it. And that it's a really good argument.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, there's this moment where Maricica does something fucking stupid. I don't remember what. And Lucy calls out her name.
Oh, it's when she's like threatening to hit the rubble onto Oakham.
Yeah, okay. And then like one of the goons is like, you haven't earned the right to say her name. And I was like, well, first of all, that's just hilariously wrong because like they knew her before she was cool. They were grandfathered into that, right?
Yeah.
But like, and this might all be redundant now, but I think it was last week or the week before we were discussing like why Maricica might want to crib so much from like very specifically kind of Christian and Catholic imagery in informing her religion. And this moment where it's seemingly like her name is coming a bit taboo stood out for me on that because like her name is really the one part that still ties Maricica to her old identity, which from my memory of her interlude, her kind of goal is to be a person who even the Wild Hunt can't necessarily justify chasing after her based on who she used to be.
So yeah, is that what you think it is, by the way, the Wild Hunt? Because this was a bit of an open question to me as well. Of like, is the Wild Hunt? The Wild Hunt can't get her while she's more abyssal.
There's notes on that later in the doc, but yeah, sure. I thought it was because she was like, it makes a big mess to take her out, and we'll talk about that. But like, I guess my point is, like she's talked about still being not yet in her final form with Charles and stuff, and it would make like I could see her making her name a taboo, maybe being part of her like plan for where she goes from here, because it's like that's the one thing that still ties her to her old identity, which from memory is something she's trying to shuck. And so because obviously that would be where some of the like Christian and Catholic imagery might come in, because like if you lean much more into monotheistic stuff rather than, like she's a blood goddess, she's very pagan god sort of energy. But if she keeps leaning into this monotheistic stuff and makes her name not something people are meant to say, like you can kind of shove it into like mythos, because like
breaks that tie.
Because like God doesn't really have a name. There's technical arguments you make against that, but like for the Abrahamic God doesn't really sort of have a name. Like it's just God. If you're monotheist, you don't necessarily need a name for the God. They just are. So yeah, I don't know. It might all be irrelevant now, but I wonder if that was part of her plan here, was to like make her name something that fades because nobody's allowed to say it.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good plan. I quite like it as a trick that I think Marcy would pull, but unfortunately, it doesn't work because
shouldn't matter now.
Yeah. So yeah, Marcy's in full fuck around and find out mode. So she sends a piece of rubble onto Oakham, and that starts a legal argument in the middle of this fight.
I love immediately as it happens. This is like the second or third time that Lucy has a thing where she just screams out Maricica, and like this one just feels like you feel the outrage in it. Like Maricica does this thing that we've just kind of established you're not allowed to do, and she specifically targets Oakum's ankle. And I was just equally outraged. So that way, I just read all of the emotion into Lucy's, because it's not adorned in the text. It's just she screams like Marisica, and I was just like, God, I feel like the outrage and the indignation. It's like halfway between somebody being like, "You can't be serious," and like a mother chastising Marisica in the way Lucy does this. It's great.
Yeah, it is pretty funny.
And there's also like this segment. There's like there's some really powerful imagery with like a mob kind of pressing in on Lucy as well. Is kind of how I describe it. Like I think you know a bunch of evil religious zealots trying to intimidate this young black girl and like goad her into making the first punch so they can be justified in going violent on her. Like it felt like really powerful to me that Lucy was able to not only have faith in the system that she helped create here, like she's helped like set up this whole sanctuary thing, but her ability to proudly stand there and lean on people like grandfather and not take the bait, like know that they can't hurt her and just not be affronted as much by their bullshit was I really thought it was powerful.
Yeah. It's it's powerful imagery, isn't it? Lucy is really just consistently putting herself in this position of being this like awesome justice badass.
Yeah. Although, like, I think it's really interesting because, like, this is, this mob is kind of trying to pressure Lucy into folding here, and it's sort of Marisica directing this mob to put pressure on the Kenneteers / Lucy specifically and all that. And I guess that just jumped out to me because the Kenneteers specifically called out how they were using a bit of mob justice on Liz a few chapters ago. And even at the time, I was a bit like, I'm not super sure like how I feel about mob justice overall. And I think I don't know. It's something I'm interested to see if it gets explored more in the story because I'm kind of I guess both sides. There wasn't that much difference I think, but between what Marisica was trying to do to Lucy here and what the Kenneteers did to Liz a few chapters ago, really, which is kind of like gang up and put pressure by threatening them and doing some mob justice. But obviously, the Kenneteers were doing it for the right reasons. So it's like, is that the only difference, or like what? Because mob justice can be good, but it can also be really terrible. So it's like is it just is mob justice, a neutral tool that it depends on the wielder, or like is there a right way to do it? This is just a thought that has been stuck in my mind since I read this. I don't really feel like I have any answers.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like any tool like that, any collective action like that can be used by a collection of good people or a collection of bad people, right?
Well, yeah, mobs don't kill people. People in mobs kill people, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just, yeah. I don't know where. I don't know if it's going anywhere or whatever. It's just a thought that's been in my head since we've been hearing a lot about mob justice recently. Is I'm like, I don't know where I stand on the idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think there are a bunch of points in this story where, like, the Kenneteers and the Negateers or the conspirators or whatever, like, they're kind of opposite sides using the same tools, but just for different.
For sure.
Yeah.
This is probably just coming from more of a place of like, I'm even unsure how I feel about the idea of mob justice when I see the Kenneteers use it for the right reasons. It's a bit, I don't know. It just, the idea of a majority just kind of bullying the minority to doing stuff, even when it's, Liz being an absolute cockhead. Like, I don't know. It feels like one of those lines that the Kenneteers ideally wouldn't be crossing, but they have to because the stakes have been raised by these chuckle fucks.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to shout out Bracken here for trying to help. He has this funny moment where he tries to convince some of the innocents that they're not thinking straight because they hit their head. And this one guy's like, I don't remember hitting my head. And Bracken's like, it's because you hit your head. I don't know why. I just found that very funny. He's just, Bracken has zero tolerance for bullshit.
Yeah. Good stuff by Bracken. And then, there's this bit where Lucy kind of is figuring out that there's weirdness going on here. specifically, I think that she realizes that Charles and the Aurum haven't been around for a few days or at least a little bit of time. I think it's from when Mariska starts assaulting the Blue Hand, so I guess a day. Yeah, Lucy really picks up on this pretty quickly.
Because this bit happens in the text, and I was like, Lucy, this is kind of the second time you've said this, and I still have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Can you please explain it to us? Yeah, it's a good kind of reminder that there's something going on that Lucy's figured out that we don't know, and I think we get it by the end of the chapter. But it's yeah, it's very funny in the moment because I'm like, oh, just fucking tell us, Lucy, I'm dying here.
Yeah, and there's a bit later where Verona kind of notices Lucy having noticed this, but still doesn't kind of get into it. But anyway, yeah. So Charles, we cut back in time, and Charles is observing the moot, and this is the point where he finds out that Avery is dead.
Although, it's so funny because even on the first read, this is so clearly Charles being an idiot because he guesses that Verona is the one. Although he calls them by their surnames, which I thought was a very odd thing for him to do.
Maybe just distancing himself from
he's trying to be distanced and impartial. Yeah, he's like, oh, was it Hayward? And the Sable kind of is like, oh, she's the one you like, is it? Yeah, okay. Well, I can't say, and you shouldn't infer. That's dangerous to do. And Charles just immediately goes, well, if it's not Hayward, then it must be Kelly. And it's like, dude, that he didn't even trick you. He full on said, hey, don't do this.
Yeah,
it's a goblin could pull off this quote unquote trick. It's hilarious.
Yeah. So how much is the Sable fucking with Charles, right? Because the Sable isn't actively moving against Charles, but it does feel kind of intentional by the Sable to trick Charles into gainsaying himself. But then having said that, later on, the Sable explicitly says that he's not up to anything and that he's still on Charles's side.
Yeah, I agree. I'm super curious to see where we're going with the Sable because he's definitely we learn a lot about him and some details about his role, which were very nice. In this chapter, and it really seems like the sort of read that we've discussed in the past of him just being a fucking by the book rules lawyer sort of thing is the way to go. He's just this originalist. These are the rules. We just do those. He's leaning into that, and so he's kind of pushing this energy in this chapter of I don't have a side. I'm neutral, and the idea of neutral is something I think this story has been talking about to death for years at this point. And this is why I just don't quite buy the Sable sort of I have no bias and I'm completely neutral, blah blah. It's but there's no such thing. As you say, he gives Charles this opportunity to fuck himself over. There's no, I don't know. I'm very interested to see where we go with the Sable because especially given how much Pale has really been reinforcing to us that even someone like the Turtle Queen can rise beyond just being what she is. I kind of refuse to believe that the Sable is just this completely unbiased dude who is fully neutral. The fact that he felt the need to test Charles or whatever is just no, he's not full. You have a bias. There's some shit you're pulling.
Well, so I want to call out this. There's this specific line from a little bit later on this that is pretty clear to me that. Well, so Charles says to the Sable, "Are you still on my side? You won't turn on me now." And the Sable says, "I am, and I won't." And potentially this "I am" comes back a bit later when the Sable is just saying, "I am what I am," not confirmation or anything, but saying, "And I won't. You won't turn on me now. I won't." I don't know.
Because he already has? I don't know.
But,
but this is that's intentionally hella misleading and really against the spirit. The whole thing about the Sable is he's kind of I'm just a guy who does the rules because I was a spirit before and now seeing the role I'm just very. It's that was clearly against the quote unquote spirit of the sentiment and answering the question.
If the Sable actually is intentionally setting Charles up, which it does feel like he is, but I don't know.
Oh, he had to have been. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Like the I am was the Sable saying just, he is and he doesn't take sides, but that's
Mm.
an intentionally misleading way of answering the
Yes.
question. So you can't
Yes.
claim this neutrality business, like, because
Yeah.
he's at the least intentionally misleading Charles about where his allegiance is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So very, very curious to see where the Sable goes by the end of it, because I feel like Pale in general has tried to tackle this idea of what neutrality means from various angles, and I think I
Mm.
can't help but think that to some degree this Sable position of I just follow the rules like won't stand up to Lucy's scrutiny.
Yeah. And then of course Charles reminisces about a girl that he had a crush on, linking because Avery is also energetic and positive. Like, I don't know. Weird vibes from Charles on this one, I thought.
I really liked this. Like I thought this
Oh, I
was
liked it from a narrative perspective, but it just gives such weird vibes from Charles.
no. See, I disagree with the weird vibes part because it's
Mm.
like I think the crush is very quick. It's this really cool, quick symbol for I mean, innocence. Not innocence so much as I don't know, just like fucking hope. I guess
Mm.
it's like Charles is being like this memory that keeps popping up of this old crush had. It's basically Charles's brain reminding him of the time when he liked the good things in the world.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
first crush he had was a girl who, was energetic and happy and everything. Same as the paths and Avery, kind of like just someone who just is positive and makes the world a better place. And it's just like you used to like that sort of thing, and Avery being gone is this really big symbol for this battle of of course the first person to be a big casualty of this war, quote unquote, obviously,
Mm.
is the girl who is the path runner, the one who's just friends with everyone and kind of nice.
Mm.
So Charles does a lot of mental gymnastics in this chapter to avoid confronting responsibility for how things have become. And I
Mm.
think this is his brain or his subconscious trying to push through and be like, hey, remember when you liked good things in the world? And he because of can't see how it's his fault.
Yeah. Um yeah, I guess. Just if you can summarize this in a single sentence as Avery's death reminds Charles of a girl that he used to have a crush on. And that single sentence sounds pretty weird to me. So,
Yeah, I mean, I get, but there's no like, yeah, there's none of that weird energy actually in it though. I don't
mm,
think. It's just that's kind of why she's stuck in his mind. I don't know.
yeah, fair enough.
Um,
Um,
Sorry, just to jump back a bit, I did want to call out as well. Sorry, we jump into this. This is that flashback is during the moot, and we see some bits here that we already saw from Lucy's perspective. But I specifically wanted to call out that Charles is extremely distracted here. He's watching the Sable. He's thinking about his other things. He's barely listening to the moot as it's happening. And the thing that they're discussing right now are the rules for Sanctuary.
yeah.
So basically, all the shit that Kenneteers and Lucy have currently weaponized against Mariska, we're seeing that he was distracted as that shit was getting penciled in, which I just loved as an extra detail.
Mm. Yeah, I guess it's kind of a cool thing to note of this. Lucy and Verona made a conscious decision to not believe that Avery is dead and therefore not get distracted by that. Whereas obviously Charles does get distracted by that here. That's what you're
Yeah,
saying, right? And
great
so
point.
it's just a very interesting, their faith in Avery is what lets this be even more of a weapon against the conspirators.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, great point.
Mm.
I mean, yeah, as Charles is sitting here bemoaning the loss of hope in the world through, tying Avery to this old crush he had or whatever,
Mm.
Verona and Lucy were sitting on the other end of the area being just refusing to give up on that hope. Well, I
Mm.
mean, Verona struggled for a bit, but Lucy got her there.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, let's the continuation of this scene is the judges chatting more. The Orem gonna head off to speak to the Alabaster in hopes of convincing them to get on side, which seems like a crazy idea, but shoot your shot, mate. And yeah, I mean, this is more kind of talking with the Sable and stuff that we were just kind of referencing.
Yeah, I love how this segment opens and Charles is standing in this cabin and he's made it for himself and he doesn't like the cabin and it's straining and popping and barely holding together and he doesn't like it and he's miserable here, but he can't think of anything to replace it with. And so he's just sitting here stewing in the shitty cabin he made and he can't think of anything better. And I was like, this isn't even a metaphor. This is just like, it's just such a funny image to start things off. It's like, it's suck eggs, Charles. You're sitting here in the situation you've contrived for yourself and your bullshit is stopping you from seeing anything else. Like, I loved it.
Yeah. It's fun to have Charles wallowing a bit. Do you think we're getting close to a Charles redemption arc?
I am still really attached to the idea that I think Verona originally pitched to like
of having him be like trapped in his role.
Yeah, Charles's redemption happening after the story, but like through him losing, but being forced to stay in this position and redeem himself through doing it properly.
Yeah,
feels like such
strong.
A good, and it's like that's so much better as a punishment than his history in jail or his history being forsworn. This is like, no, you will actively help the community and you will like take responsibility and do it from a place where I presume he won't have that much power for a long time. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I also really loved this moment where Charles starts to compare the Kenneteers to Rook. He actually does it twice, I think, but that really jumped out to me because I always saw Charles as much closer to Rook. Like I think I sit closer to the Kenneteers, so I was like, no, wait, you're the Rook. They're not the Rooks. And it's like it's really helping to continue to establish this way. Rook kind of sits in between the two sides. Like it seems like both sides kind of view Rook as too close to the other side. Because the vibe I get from Charles is that he sees Rook as somebody who's kind of stuck in this pattern because she's like almost not willing to go far enough, or she's just trying the same old tactics, whereas he's so cool and he's trying something new. And yeah, like I don't know. That's just, first of all, it's just so funny to me that like Charles can look at Rook and think that's what the Kenneteers are becoming because they're ineffective. Whereas we look at Rook and think, well, that's the problem with Charles. She commits war crimes.
Yeah.
And again, it's continuing from Rook's perspective. It's just like she's still playing both sides, so she can always come out on top. Is how it feels. Like she sits like morally right between these two sides, and she can kind of pick and choose as she sees fit. And I'm just building a big checklist of stuff I can't wait to see where we're going with the rest of the story. Right next to the Sable is Rook.
Yeah. Rook. Bloody Rook. We'll get to Rook, I'm sure, next arc.
I really hope she's the one who fucks with Helen, just because we had that little teaser that she met with Helen and she clearly knows what's up, and I just it would do a lot to redeem Rook in my eyes if she fucked Helen right over.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk on that in a second because I have something on that I want to touch on, but later.
Okay.
But yeah, there's this bit that we talked about before where I'm confused by the Alabaster's allegiances, but we've talked about that, so let's continue on.
Yeah, well, and I think it'd be worth doing a kind of like stock take of the state of affairs at the end of this chapter because a lot of shit has moved around the board in this chapter. I think it's worth like trying to take stock of where everyone's at. So the last thing before we move on from this conversation that Ryan, Charles, and the Sable sort of have is there is this bit where the Aurum is kind of like, mate, are you sure you can trust Marisica? And Charles is like, yeah, no, I can trust her because right now my understanding of what she wants is that it helps her to help me. So yeah, I can totally trust her. And I was like, it's just the most fair whether like even Charles can't admit that there's anything genuine between them. Like just I don't know. I know this isn't news or anything, but just the absolute contrast between the Kenneteers who can genuinely trust even a dead girl to come back and save them versus Charles is kind of like, yeah, I think I can trust Marcy because helping me helps her, I think.
Yeah. I wouldn't trust Marcy, but
No.
also Charles isn't going to have to worry about it for much longer, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, Dr. Carl. I guess it's just so funny to me that like Charles and Marissa are about as close as any two people on Charles's side can be, and they still just there's not any genuine trust there. It's still just like, well, like, and it's, I don't know. I know she's an ex-Fae, and I still kind of keep treating her like a Fae, and she's not. But it's just like, Marissa as a person, I wouldn't trust thinking helping me helps her with a 10-foot pole with this woman. Like, the idea that you can trust her because you think you get her motivations is just a bizarre take to have, given everything Marissa has done in this fucking story.
Yeah. It's yeah, I don't know. Charles, I think, is very silly. He's a very silly boy.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't think he makes the good calls.
Yeah. But as I say, it's going to pan out for Charles because Mariska's not going to be somebody who can afford to betray him many times. But yeah, so we jump to Snowdrop's perspective. Snowdrop is moving across the promenade on a mission, but struggling to carry it out until she's helped by Fugly Bob and the absent barista.
Yeah, and I think this is my favorite segment in this chapter, which is an extremely stacked field. But like the way so many little details click into place as it ends is so good. Especially like rereading this was so fun.
Yeah,
because all the little moments, the fact that like Snowdrop had a rhyme for how she moved on the promenade. Like on my first read, I was like, that's weird. Why would she need this? And that's kind of like, oh, she's been doing this for days. Like, of course, she's developed a system. Like, so many little things like that are so fun on the reread.
Yeah, yeah, it is good.
Huzzah!
Yeah, it's a very fun section. I loved we meet the absent barista, who is this like invisible, or not, I wouldn't say invisible, but like in negative space defined by the space in the steam of her coffee machine that she like occupies. Very strange. And then the fact that she leaves like work at the coffee shop also just made me laugh.
Yeah, it's like she became the absent companion rather the absent barista, and I was like, yeah, but now she's definitely an absent
actually
barista.
Really is the absent barista now. Yeah, that's the same thing I was thinking. But no, she gets someone to cover for her, I guess. So fine.
Yeah.
It must be hard for somebody who is defined by being absent to hold down a job. Legit.
Well, I mean, that's the paths the paths seem better about that sort of thing.
True.
They're more supportive. Yeah, I mean, this whole segment with Snowdrop reaching this restaurant, just getting the help from them, is just heartwarming, like tear jerking. Like, it just, I think a lot of us kind of expected that something to do with Avery's many connections might be a factor in how she comes back from the dead or whatever. But I love that really, like, that's kind of true, but it's through this Snowdroppy lens. Like, it's Fugly Bob picks her up because he's like, wait, aren't you the one who fucking saved us? Like, I gotta help you. And then the absent barista is just like, hey, you keep coming here and you're really nice. I want to help you. Like, it's the promenade and the networking that Avery's been contributing to that sort of does end up helping to save her, but as much because of Snowdrop as it is because of her. And like, I think that's a really cool extra angle on just like Avery's network itself saving her.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And there's just some good funny humor now that we're back in Snowdrop's head. Like,
yes,
I love this moment where she pontificates on whether she needs to restore herself by eating junk food versus being good for her body and having healthy food, but she won't like that. Like, I've never related to a character so much as somebody who's sitting there being like, well, if I eat garbage, I'll enjoy it more, and that's good for me. But also, it's garbage, and I shouldn't eat it.
Yeah, I think it tracks. Yeah, I think being in Snowdrop's head is really fun. Like, especially because we get to see what she really means. You know what I mean? Which is so rare for Snowdrop.
Yeah. Well, and the only other time we've had that, I think, was when in her last interlude, like 4.x. Yeah.
Yes. But I think it really helps this stuff land so well, because we're still in kind of emotional reeling mode, right? Like
Yeah.
this section especially is trying to get us to still think that Avery is dead. And so I think the innate comedy of Snowdrop's backwards talk would just break that a bit too much. So it just kind
Yeah.
of works and holds together really nicely.
Yeah, I think you're really right. I think that's a really good point because it just lets the segment hit
Have
the
its
emotions.
tension. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It doesn't undercut the tension. And then, well, yeah.
I mean, there is the one funny moment. Like it does get used to dispel tension once, which is when she's waking Avery up and she's like, "Oh my god, Avery, you're okay. You're gonna get better. It's all fine." And Avery's like, "Can you fucking
Well,
not?" Like,
but
just
that's the release, right? Like that's the
yeah,
release
yeah,
of tension. So it works really well
exactly.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, you're right. That was the time to bring it out. But yeah, like because you're right. Like it's been established other Lost can understand her in text, and it's been established that when we're in her POV, we see what she's saying. So
Yeah.
you don't really question it, and then it just lets you. You're right. Like just actually see how because Snowdrop like she's really fucked up here. Like talking about how heartwarming this segment is. It's because like Snowdrop very nearly dies and seems like she's been on the brink for days because every time she visits Avery, she gives her everything she possibly can and scrapes her way back to the promenade. Um, and so, like, just her getting here and she's so fucking defeated, and these people are just so nice to her. And there's this moment where it almost breaks her. And you're right that moment would have lost impact if we were getting it through her opposite speak.
Mm, yeah, for sure. But yeah, Snowdrop arrives at her destination, and it's Avery, healed by refilled healing potion, which brings her back to life.
Yay, we did it.
Yay! Um, yeah, she's back, and she's played possum, which is very funny. Just like a very funny reveal. Which, I mean, I'm sure I saw some people referencing, but nobody like predicted in the power predictor thread that sheet that we have that like Snowdrop's fake death energy would be used to help this playing dead land, right?
I saw it a lot, like in at the very, very start of Arc 22, or maybe at the end of Arc 21. Like, I definitely saw people talking about it on our
Mm,
Discord, but I think it kind of got immediately discarded as like, well, that wouldn't work on the Sable.
mm.
Um, so yeah,
Well, and it
obviously,
didn't work on the Sable.
no,
So, yeah.
exactly. But like, I think, yeah, a lot of people brought up, yeah, playing possum as something that could be relevant, but then everyone kind of discarded it. So I love that it's like, yeah, we just didn't consider the other angles, which is that the Sable would be in on it, despite him being quote unquote neutral. Um,
Um, I
yeah,
did see this prediction, which I thought was funny when I was searching through our Pale Predictor to see if anyone had actually. I want to call out if anyone had actually said that Avery was going to play dead with Snowdrop energy. Nobody did, but Jaso gave this prediction, which was Percival will use his opossum spirit energy to fake death in a dramatic fashion, and it won't matter at all. But he's probably going to try it, which I just thought was very funny.
yeah. No, but yeah, I kind of love this as like, yeah, Avery playing possum was all something that I think quite a few people guessed very early on, but it was
Yes.
very easy to discard because there were extra factors, and I think that's
Yeah.
a really clever way to do mysteries like this because it's like it was very gettable. You just had to be considering the other factors, like like the Sable or that. We didn't really call it out, but like the shell of glamour that Avery made for herself, the reason it was able to be that convincing was because she poured
Mm,
all of her check marks into it. So that's
mm,
like something that's been getting built up for a very long time.
yeah. Yeah. Um, So yeah, we next go back to a Charles section, and this is when Charles finds out that Avery is still alive. He's gainsaid by the Alabaster, and he and the Aurum have to basically steer clear so they don't accidentally give away whatever he's up to. Um, I do like that this thing that's very funny that starts the this section is him having to oversee some goblins who fucked up the sword move stuff and accidentally started at 6 p.m. instead of 6 a.m. or whatever. Just very stupid.
I don't think it really works as a joke because his last segment, that was how it started as well. His last segment talks about the dick measuring contest.
Yeah.
Um, and then this segment starts and it's like, it's another goblin thing. You're like, oh, is this still the sword moot? And he's like, no, they just fucked up. This is like 2 days later. So it's just funny.
Yeah.
Like that's a great setup. I really like the like he shows up and the alabaster has this moment where she's like, "Wait, you don't even realize what's wrong? Like, how weak are you?" And I
Mm,
didn't quite get what she meant by that the first time, but then knowing he's gainsaid, you kind of read it again
mm,
the second time. It's like, this is a really good point. Like, is Charles really so fucking weak and shit right now that like he didn't like? Because this whole arc, every 10 minutes, the Kenneteers have been talking about, oh, we don't have as much power as we used to. Like, we're struggling for power. Like, they are intensely aware when something is wrong with their power. Whereas apparently Charles is so deep in the hole that like didn't even notice that he'd been gainsaid.
mm, yeah. Oh, Charles, you fool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the alabaster is pretty fun in this scene too.
Oh, and she is. I love the part where she's sort of like she says something kind and then she's like, but if I was gonna be less kind, like if I was just gonna be a bitch, and then she just spits absolute fire, and I was like, you should do that part more often. That was great.
Mm, yeah.
Like, yeah, Ali rules, and I want to see more of her.
Good stuff. Um, so yeah, the the next section we get to is Avery kind of peeping on folks from the path, kind of figuring out, okay, I've got an advantage. Everyone thinks I'm dead. How am I going to use this?
Yeah, and yeah, seeing a little bit more than she wanted to even. Uh I'm really curious to see like one of the first things we're really hit by, because this is our first Avery point of view in days. Um and it really focuses in on how her family's coping. Like Sheridan and Rowan are getting along. Sheridan's doing the dishes. Like shit's fucked. They're really feeling it. Her parents are obviously well, I mean, they're working through their sadness, it seems. But it's like the first thing we are really confronted with from Avery's perspective is this very human impact that this play dead maneuver has had on everyone in her life.
Yeah.
Like, it was a pretty dog move in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I
Like,
know. She's going to have to deal with her parents being pretty upset when she's back.
yeah, like I think like this has been a thing Avery has been doing for a long time, is kind of neglecting her family with the practice. It really came up a lot in like her Thunder Bay days. Um and so I guess I feel like that is maybe going to come to a bit of a head here, because yeah, this was undoubtedly a good move. It worked. We seemingly dealt a huge blow to Marisica. You can't really fault it, but like it did damage to her innocent life, and that's going to bite her in the ass in some way, I think, on a personal level at least.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Um,
it's also just I love it. Like I think we called this out when she first kind of disappeared, but it's like the fact that Avery used this thing to convince everyone that she was dead, and then like turned that around into a weapon, is a great remix of like where she was before the story. Like she was someone who slipped
mm,
under the radar and
oh, interesting.
was
Yeah.
miserable and all that, and like kind of got a bit lost or whatever. This time she got very very lost, but like absolutely came back with a vengeance and used it, and it's because of these networks she's been building. Um,
Yeah.
like yeah, she's a stronger person now, so she's actually able to do something like this on purpose and kick ass with it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
I like that as a remix of her past. I think it's really good.
yeah.
Um,
Because it's just always been a little bit funny that like the path runner of the trio is the one who's the networking person. Like the whole point of Lost stuff is that it's out in the middle of nowhere and kind of unreachable, and connections. Like there's not many connections and stuff out there. So Avery's like always dripping in connections, yet she's like
mm,
able to run around the paths and stuff. And like so, this is just like I think that's why it worked. Like last time she was just kind of lost, and it's like this time she was lost, but she still has all this stuff tying her to Earth, which allowed her to kind of come back and kick ass.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Hey, I want to talk about some of the stuff that she spies on. I mean, the first one that's very funny is her parents starting to get it on, but more. Let's focus on the actual stuff here. She sees Helen in multiple places at once. Uh, is this enough, do you think, to start to like? I feel like we're going to get the Helen unraveling moment pretty soon.
I mean, I hope so. The sooner Helen gets her just desserts, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, I agree. That feels like because we know Rook seems to know what's up, and I love the idea of Rook being involved in destroying Helen still, because like Helen is in so many ways the opposite of an Oni, in that she's someone who chooses to lock herself inside the form and cage that she was given and all that. But
Mm.
I don't know. Yeah, the fact that Avery now knows there's something up with Helen has to be a first step towards doing something about her.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think between Avery and Rook, maybe, it'll be done.
I'm seeing a lot of people call out Verona being able to figure it out. I think probably I think we're all thinking of the moment where Verona just kind of figured out Muss's shtick like incredibly quickly off almost no information.
Yeah, you're
Um,
right.
Yeah, I mean she could. I guess we'll see. The fun thing about Helen is it's like because I don't quite know how you deal with her because it seems like if you just say what she is, that's enough to like because their whole thing relies on the spirits not really knowing.
Mm.
So you'd think just being able to say it out loud would be enough to seriously weaken her.
Mm.
But then also,
Yeah.
if you seriously weaken her, she spills out as a horror, right? Like, because she is still a horror inside. So, like, revealing her secret is essentially saying you no longer get to be just a person. You have to be a giant horror that's hundreds of limbs that can come for us and can't be bound. Like,
Yeah.
that's not really better.
I think it is. I mean, like, I think her trick, she gets a lot of mileage out of it. And if she was just a horror, like, I don't know,
Sure.
people deal with horrors, right?
But I'd do it
guess those
somewhere
people are
far
Helen.
away. yeah, exactly. You'd want to do it far away or something. Like it's just, it's not a slam dunk. Like you don't. I don't think you just get to say Helen is a horror and then she dies like that.
Yeah.
That just creates a different kind of monster that you have to deal with.
Yeah, true. But then, the other one that kind of jumps out to me about this is Avery sees the wild hunt and is like, why aren't you hunting? And then has a moment where she's like, oh, she might have had a thought why, which is maybe what leads her to de-abyssalize Marcy, hopefully letting the wild hunt come in, but we'll have to see, I suppose.
Yeah, that was the vibe I got from it, is that it's because it's that thought that kind of leads us out of the section. And then we get led back into her fucking Marisica right up. So it feels like you meant to connect those dots.
Because then she heads to the build-up next and kind of goes through it to the mechanical C version, which, confirmed that it was Avery in that vision, like we were seeing through Avery's eyes.
Yeah, that's fun.
But then her looking through the gate of Horn, sorry, I get them mixed up, but the gate of Horn is the sharing the eyes one, right?
Yeah.
Her looking through that and seeing that the Kennishes are going to attack Marcy is like, okay, now let's kick off my plan. So presumably, like, she starts putting this all together, sees they're going to fuck with Marcy, and then is like, yeah, cool, time to do it, time to get that electromagnet.
I think so. Yeah, I think like Avery's using the gates there to get her timing as right as she can. Yeah. But yeah, no, with the wild hunt, I get. Oh, we'll talk about. Let's talk about when we get to the state of affairs at the end of the chapter. Yeah.
So then, we're back in Verona's head. Lucy kind of wins her argument. Marissa gets temporarily weakened. Verona taps into engine head and gets a bit of, what's that one? Who's Magneto's brother? Who Juggernaut? That's right. Who just runs through shit. That's the vibe that I got here.
Absolutely. Like I love the detail she puts into like she bodies it's our old mate Pig Dog Man.
Pig Dog Boy.
Reappears. It's been 17 arcs since we saw him, and he's like a big 300-pound dude. And I love how Verona calls out she's like a 90-pound girl, and she just absolutely flattens him. Like that's really fun, and I love the like the growl. She says like this. She's like growling, but it's like an engine noise. Like it's one of those moments that Wildbow stories have where I'm like, I just need to see this on a screen and hear it. Like watching Verona kind of transform and make engine noises as she starts running around, just beating the shit out of everyone, is so cool.
Yeah, it is very funny. I do love this bit where Helen's like, who do you think is stronger, me with the forces backing me or you with your line and the forces backing you? Lucy says, who's backing you? It's just such a funny slight because, Charles and Orem are not here. Marcy's getting fucked. Like, Helen, you're not in as good a position as you think you are, mate.
Yeah.
Very funny.
Yeah, I love because this is sort of, we're now realizing what Lucy realized ages ago, and it's fun to see Lucy kind of play the dramatic irony there because at this point, I think Verona is the only person in the scene who hasn't really figured this out.
Yeah. Well, other than Helen.
Yeah, true. Barely a person.
Yeah.
Not because she's a
Sure,
horror,
sure,
just
sure.
because of her
Just because of
personality.
how terrible she is. Yeah.
I also, this is just such a small bit, but I really enjoyed this moment where Lucy and Marissa are kind of arguing, and then Marissa once again accuses Lucy of flailing, and Verona's like, "Well, you're just trying to complicate something very simple." And then she goes, "Sorry for butting in, Lucy." And it's just like a fun callback to that bit where Macaulay did the same thing last week, where Macaulay like saved Lucy's life, and she's like, "Oh, sorry for stealing the kill," and like Lucy just says the same thing to Verona, where it's like, we need to talk about your guys' priorities. I just continue to love the dynamic between all of these hooligans and Lucy, where they're just like, "Oh, sorry for stepping on your toes," and Lucy's like, "No, you're helping. That's called helping. It's fine."
Yeah. Yeah. These three, they're pretty funny, huh?
Yeah, I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see what happens like at the reunion with Avery and stuff right after this.
Yeah. So yeah, Marissa kind of surrounds herself in people so she has a chance to heal, but instead the abyssal spike is forcefully pulled through her and out of her. Avery is behind her. Avery is back and has de-spiked her.
Yep, fucking magnets. How do they work? The answer is the paths don't know, but they'll do it anyway.
Yeah.
This is great. I mean, there's already been like 3, I think, fan arts of this moment I've seen on the subreddit, so that pretty much sums up how badass a moment it is.
Yeah, it is a very badass moment. It's very much like I was thinking about this. It's very much the extension of Avery's hit them from the sidelines while they're distracted vibe, right? Like pretend she's dead so she can hit them so hard from the sidelines.
Yeah.
Very good stuff. And now Marcy is fucked.
Question mark? Yeah.
Like, how fucked is Marcy now? Because she's presumably not Abyssal anymore. And I mean, I don't know. Like, if I was religious and believed in God and a tangible God that I could see, but then I saw
Yeah.
that God become deified. Well, I'd still kind of, I guess,
Well,
believe in them, but like, you know.
so that's the thing. She didn't get de-deified because like
Sure.
she was in this weird thing where my understanding was she's got like half of herself tied to the abyss and the other half was tied to this divine realm full of blood. So she was like an abyssal goddess of blood, which was tying those two halves. And I think it was said at one point that the trick with uncorking her, it might have been Gilkey who said this, but like you can't just you couldn't just kind of kill her because she'd set herself up as a funnel between these two realms, and there'd be a big mess to clean up if you ruined that pipeline. So I guess what we're about to find out is what Avery's done. What has that done to the pipeline? It seems like hopefully it's just trapped all of it in the blood part, which would mean Marissa is still very much a god, but as you say, she's lost like all of her followers are very tied to the abyss. Like when they've been dying and getting resurrected, that's all been happening through the abyss. Like her resurrection powers, ironically, weren't from her religious side; they were from her abyssal side.
Yeah, so that's obviously gonna fuck with her. I guess I was just kind of trying to flag like how much are the people around her gonna turn on her or defend her now? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, she seems to have been the stronger and closer acolytes she has are the ones who are more abyssal because it's like the people who were more hers were the ones who kept getting, their little resurrection baths in the abyss. So they're presumably a lot less hers now. And her big lieutenants, the angels, they were bogeymen, right? So that they're very abyssal. So like I don't know. Like she's a god still, and that's gonna matter. But without her tie to the abyss, she's just lost a pretty substantial tie to a lot of her grunts, and that's gonna I think it's gonna be really. I have a feeling like it's gonna go a bit all over the place. I imagine some people might stick by her, others won't. Like there might be a bit of a fun civil war within Marissa's church over this.
Yeah.
I mean
A religious schism. I could see that.
yeah, I mean, there's also another important divine religious figure who's sitting in this
Yeah,
chapel who
I
is
just
unmolested.
yeah,
Um,
like is the family man gonna take over all these churches? Fuck's sake.
I think it would be fun to learn that he was leading one arm of this civil war in Marisica's church after this. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
but then yeah, so and then as you say, I think the thing with the Wild Hunt is they said they weren't willing to go to some of the places Marisica had gone to take her out. I feel like was the framing,
Mm,
and I think we've all long assumed that was the Abyss, although. I don't know. I wouldn't have thought the Abyss would be that bad for them, but yeah, it feels like the Wild Hunt should be more in play now that Marisica has had her spike taken out, if for no other reason than she's weakened.
mm, yeah.
Um, and then I also, sorry, just throw in a left field prediction. I kind of hope that Derosha gets involved in fucking Marisica up from this point, just because I'm still angry about the way Marisica got Gilkey to fuck up Derosha's primeval.
Mm,
And so I hope Derosha is similarly holding a grudge and will take this opportunity to join the Wild Hunt.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Weird. We'll see. It's
Um,
true. Yeah. Is Durashay still gonna? Yeah. Mm.
but yeah, so and I guess while we're talking about like the state of affairs with Mariska, we should because we've got to touch on the judges from there as well because we've seen a big shift in the power dynamic within the four judges this chapter too because
Yeah.
obviously Charles and Ryan again said for at least a little bit longer, maybe. Charles feels like he's in very big trouble because he was very adamant in this chapter that it's fine. Marisica will pay off his debts for him very soon. And
Yeah.
if Marisica's at all in trouble, I don't think she's going to
Yeah.
be that
No, she's not.
reliable.
She's not gonna be able to pay back that debt. So
No, and
yeah.
this is an idea that's been thrown around for a long time, but and it comes back to Charles and Marisica have never been on the same side in the same way the Kennetiers are. The Kennetiers trust and work for and don't keep track of debts with each other. Like we've seen Verona just dip into Avery's funds while she's dead. Whereas if Charles is relying on Marisica and then something happens to Marisica, he can't trust on her in the same way, and that's hopefully finally going to catch up with them.
Mm. Yeah. Where could they possibly? Because Alabaster not going to loan them power. Aurum and Charles. Well, I guess the Aurum is not gainsaid, right? The Aurum is just got to
Yeah,
keep away
okay.
for a little bit, or that doesn't apply anymore. So maybe the Aurum is still potentially a source of power, but every other one is now more
Also,
in
the
debt.
Aurum just intentionally massively shrunk his domain, so he's actually a lot
Yeah,
less
good
powerful.
point. Good point.
Um, and
Yeah,
again, that was another thing. Charles is like, "Hey, don't worry, we'll get you
we'll
your
get you
domain
back.
back
Yeah,
soon. Like, I can handle that. That's fine." So that's like
yeah.
another situation where he's got somebody else who he kind of is meant to do something for. That without Marisica, he's just I don't see a path for him to be able to do it.
Mm,
So yeah, we've kind of got the Alabaster kind of not on Team Kennet, but on Team not be a fuckwit, which is essentially being on Team Kennet. Um,
mm,
we've got the Sable kind of pretending like he doesn't have a fish in this race. And then, the Aurum and Charles are kind of a bit of a fucking hot mess at the moment. So the judges as an institution, I don't know where they're going to be at the start of Arc 23 now.
yeah.
They're a mess. It feels like this is a great opportunity for the Kennetiers to really fuck up the Red Heron because nobody's around to back them as well as chasing off Marisica.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see that next arc. Something to do with bankruptcy, empty wallet. I don't know.
I've definitely, I think we've had a number of attempts where we've tried to guess arc names to each other on Facebook, going back over a year. So every time a new arc starts, I quickly control F in our Facebook Messenger history to see if any of us guessed it at any point. So we'll be continuing that tradition as soon as Arc 23 starts.
I want to say run out could be one, or something to do with things having run out. I don't know, or drained. Kind of feel like that. Anyway,
Yeah, I'm trying to think because I feel like the angle that would work. I say should work best because I've never gotten one of these right. But this is going to be an arc. I think this is going to be a bit of an arc of as well as chasing Mariska, I feel like stuff's going to have to start to rebuild, and then also some people are going to get chased for debts. So, like stuff to do with that might be relevant. I don't
know. What's that? What's that phrase? It's like the cows have come home to roost or something. Come due, yeah, that's kind of what I'm vibing as well.
Come due, I like, yeah.
Yeah. The cows have come home to roost. I just realized that doesn't make any sense.
It's
Something
okay.
like that, though, isn't it? I don't know.
I just started talking about fish being in races, so that's fine. We don't do animals on this podcast.
Anywho, that's the end of our chapter for this week.
Yeah, so I'm so excited for Arc 23 now. We've got the Kenneteers are all over the place. Like, sorry, does the Sable have to undo the death shit that he did to Avery now?
Good question.
He has to, right? I'm going to be upset if they've permanently lost some of these connections between them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That could be a really fun thing to explore. We'll see.
But yeah, should we pull out? We put out some Reddit comments this week. Some folks who left comments in the on the Parahuman subreddit. As I said, nobody made full predictions about the opossum fake death energy stuff. But if you want to make predictions for the future, what will the title of this next arc be, for example? You can do that by heading to our Pale Predictor form, which is linked in the show notes down below. But yeah, we put out some Reddit comments this week.
Yeah, and I want to go first with mine because mine's from Koga305 on Reddit, and I felt a little bit bad about pulling this out now because I saw you actually had the same comment in our notes, and I unknowingly stole this from you. But yeah, Koga305 was somebody. It was the first person who pointed out to me that the description of the run-on sentence, which was one of the paths Snowdrop ran, was a run-on sentence, which was a very fun little joke. So yeah, I never would have noticed that. So I'm thankful for people like Koga305 pointing it out to me.
That was very funny. I put out a comment by Zetithas, which looks like it could be a palindrome, but it's not. Which is just calling out that Warbo's description of when we're finding out like Avery's what happened to Avery. The backdrop is the moon being shot and fractured, which is very funny as a piece of imagery to like describe. I guess the thing I took from it was like Miss continuing to just be like put in jeopardy by all of the Kennedy's plans, which I thought was a pretty funny thing.
Oh, and yeah, I don't know. Like the last time we saw the moon crack apart, it was a good thing too. Like that was Mrs. Triumphant landing.
Yeah, true. Just good moon imagery. Continued classic moon imagery in this in this story.
The moon's been through the ringer in this fucking story. It's been cracked open. It's bled a bunch. Like you don't usually see the moon get so bruised and battered in a story, and that's why Pale's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I do want to clarify. I think in the chat, the chat's mentioning this. I think their original comment also called out that like a moon shot is or like shooting for the moon is kind of a thing where you like, I don't know, you go for a plan that is surely not going to work or something, and that's what this comment was kind of calling out as something that happened.
Yeah. But yeah, good comments left. We also had a discussion question this week, which I thought was pretty fun, which was, what is a candy or food that you've heard about that you think is actually a goblin prank? We got some candies. I guess we got chocolates.
Yeah. Mostly other food, though, which is
mostly
fair.
other foods. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to call out Ripper 1337s to start, who they mentioned Bullet, which did come up last week, but then they also mentioned Kasumatsu, which I'd forgotten about, which is that like cheese with maggots in it. And I've never tried this, and I'm probably never going to.
Oh, no, of course not.
But the thing that gets me with this, and blue cheese too, and this is going to be a recurring theme.
Blue cheese is much more normalized than maggot cheese.
Oh, it is. It is. No, but like what I want to say about both maggot cheese and blue cheese, and it's going to be a recurring theme for me with all these answers is, who's the fucking idiot that figured out that this was edible? Like, you know, wait, because blue cheese is cheese that went moldy, and like, who's the dipshit that was like, oh, it's probably still good? Like, it's clearly not. It's covered in blue.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like a lot of food things are found by just like figuring out the right way to let food go bad. You know what I mean? Like
Oh
fucking
yeah, for sure.
fermentation as a process. And cheese already as a food is like it's just like having it go bad in the right way. Isn't it? Same as like yogurt and shit, right? Like it's it going bad just in a slightly tweaked way. I don't know.
Yes, but if it's got maggots in it,
Sure.
surely a normal person looks at this and goes, "Oh, we've gone too far."
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point.
like who is the absolute insane person that looked at the maggoty cheese and thought, "Oh, yeah, it's probably," and then managed to turn it into a thing. Like this is the thing about maggot cheese is it's like one of those like delicacies, and it's like no, that's just cheese that got fucked up.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's a delicacy born from rarity, which is caused by it being gross, not by its taste. Like, there's no way it would not taste terrible.
Yeah, it's like it is one of those ones where I'm like, oh god, if I was in, I think they said it's French or something like or Italian. If I was in that part of the world and somehow had the opportunity to try it, I'm like, well, I guess I have to.
No way, I still wouldn't. Anyway,
I definitely, I would like if I'm in that part of the world, I couldn't say no.
Yeah,
I'd regret it, but you have to do it for the story.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, we did brown milk, so what the fuck am I talking about? So I want to call out one that I remembered as I was going through these answers that nobody else mentioned, which is, have you heard of Autolan, Elliot?
No.
So it's this food. It's basically it's a bird, like a French bird, I want to say, that is now like has been eaten to, endangeredness. That is like fattened up and then drowned in alcohol, and then you eat it whole, like you eat it whole in one bite. It's a very small bird. But the thing that's funny about this to me is you wear the traditional way to eat this is like you wear like a thing over your face, and this is maybe apocryphal, but the kind of story is of like this is so that you can't see the heinous act that you're doing as you're eating it. I think that's, I don't know, that feels very apocryphal to me, but that's like definitely something that people say is like you cover your face when you eat this meal so that God can't see you doing this shameful act.
Just like Helen.
Yeah, which is just funny. Yeah. I don't know.
But it's also like, isn't that a clue that you shouldn't be doing this?
Like, I mean, there's a lot of people saying you shouldn't do it nowadays, for sure. But like, yes,
no, like because I can like again, that's the sort of thing where I'm like, I could see people in the Middle Ages or whatever, and there's a famine, and they're like, oh, we need to fucking start eating these birds, and so they do it, but they're embarrassed because they're needing to do this to survive in the famine, so they put their napkins over their heads, and I'm like that. That origin story totally tracks to me. But then when you get to the point where it becomes this delicacy and it's like, oh, yes, it's tradition that you make it so God can't see you as you do it. It's like, maybe we shouldn't be doing it then. Like,
yeah, no shit. Anyway, I just thought that was a funny one that people didn't mention.
Yeah. Duonim called out NyQuil chicken, which I had to Google real? What that is.
Is this real?
I think this is like a thing people posted on the internet, and it's never actually really happened. It's like people have covered chicken in NyQuil and then presumably thrown it out once they took the photo. But yeah, I mean I think it was a TikTok trend for a while, and I can totally see goblins being the instigators of a lot of those like Tide Pod style TikTok trends.
Yeah, no, totally. Definitely feels like one of those trends. I really like Duonim's other mentioned one, which was, I googled this because I couldn't believe it was true, but it is.
Same.
Hematogen, which is I
would have called it hematogen.
Sure. Which is a Soviet era candy or chocolate bar made with cow's blood, which is wild. What was the word for it? It's it's a nutrition. This is from the Wikipedia page now. It's a nutrition bar which is notable in one of its main ingredients is black food albumin, a technical term for cow's blood. Which, just like that's just legit what it is. Very strange.
I really wanted to call this out because not only is I think this may be the one example of a candy bar that we actually got.
Mm.
but I've been giving Avery so much shit for her meat flavored candy bars.
Yeah.
And I just like to say that I stand by it. They're real, they're in real life,
Mm.
and that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but yes, that was a good one. Hobo Demon talked about miracle berries, which I think are very fun. I
Yes.
love miracle berries. I've
Did
had a
we
few miracle berry parties in my time.
Yeah, well, I've only had them once, but it was when I was in America. I don't know if you were there for that, but
Mm,
we
I'm
got a
not
bunch of
sure.
Guinness. So for those who don't know, miracle berries are like this. They're a berry. But you eat them and they fuck up your taste buds and affect how you process sour and
Yeah, they
bitter
make you
tastes.
basically not really able to, not really able to
Um,
taste sour and bitter tastes.
yeah, and so like one of the things they say is that like Guinness tastes like chocolate milk or like a
Mm,
chocolate milkshake when
mm.
when you've had miracle berries. So we got some Guinness and some miracle berries when I was in America.
Did it?
Um, not really. I mean, it definitely didn't
Mm,
taste like Guinness. It was. I would say it was closer to a chocolate thick shake than it was to Guinness in how it
mm.
tasted.
Sure, sure.
But I wouldn't like chocolate thick shake would not have been my first descriptor
Right.
of it. It was like it because it's still like it didn't have that milky texture. It was like it was weirdly sweet, but it was
Yeah.
like you could still tell that it was not creamy.
Yeah. The thing I love about miracle berries is eating like, you know, you can basically just bite into a lemon and it's just like fucking
Yeah,
delicious. It's
yeah.
crazy.
Munching on lemon slices like they're orange slices
Yeah.
is very
Or
fun.
like green apples, or it
Yeah,
actually really enhances or like changes the flavor of things like green apples or cherries, and makes it really weird. And it's like a very weird experience. Very fun.
yeah. They also clarified a lot of what we talked about last week. So, like, Hakal is the Greenland shark thing.
Yeah.
And again, this is one of those things where it's like it's fermented for months to make it
Hmm.
edible despite the toxic levels of uric acid. And
Hmm.
part of me is just like,
Yeah.
even in the most dire of medieval circumstances, I can't imagine who the fuck figured out that you can do this.
Mm.
Like like because it's not just about like it's about the science behind it. Like, who is the guy who was like, yeah, no, but if we ferment it for long enough, it becomes something that doesn't kill us. That's crazy.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And then points us out that surströmming is the fermented herring thing that we were talking about. I kind of got them mixed
yeah,
up. But
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Was that all of them? Did we miss any?
no, I really wanted to call out Gyroda, who pointed out that like Americans add butyric acid into their chocolate, or at least
Mm.
Hershey's really does.
Mm.
And that was caused by goblin antics. And I fully agree because that stuff tastes like vomit. And I know people say you get used to it, but I still, Hershey's chocolate has a smidge of vomit in the taste. And I don't know
Oh
why you would
yeah, is
add
that why
this.
that tastes like that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because so I think butyric acid, and I'm drawing on very dormant university knowledge here.
Mm.
It's like very, it's one of the main things in your stomach acid. Um, and yeah, it's like a good preservative. I think that's why they add it to the chocolate, but it gives it a bit of a vomit taste.
Yeah, nice. Good stuff. Good stuff, Hershey's. um yeah, pretty weird, pretty wild.
um,
But that's
we
classic
also didn't do
American
Captain
cuisine.
Rhinos.
Mm.
So yeah, Captain Rhino
Oh yeah, this
basically
one.
suggested most dairy products are probably goblin infested, just because yeah, like as you kind of alluded to earlier, like cheese, yogurt, like all of them are just kind of like taking milk, which is something that's extremely temperamental storage wise, and fucking it up in just the right way. Like, so you can just imagine this goblin who fermented a bunch of different milks and then gave them all to people, and one of them was like, "Oh, this is great."
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff. Yeah.
I think they also talked about, well, I'll just kind of quote it. My
Mm.
friend told me that somewhere in Southeast Asia, he saw a thing where you would take a live snake, cut out its heart, drop the heart in strong alcohol, and then drink it. This is
This is
definitely goblin behavior.
this is a crazy one. This is
But
wild.
I would 100% do. Like, sign me up for that. That sounds cool as hell.
Mm.
Am I the only one who was like, I want to do that when I read that?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I mean it. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's in the same vibe as like, what is it like vodka with worms or scorpions in it or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah, sorry, were you there when we had this
actually,
snake whiskey?
I think so.
In
Now
America.
you
I know I
mention
keep bringing
this.
up America today, but
No, I'm pretty sure I was there.
but were you a member of the group of us who cooked up and ate the snake after we broke open the bottle and then all got sick?
So. I don't think so.
Yeah, you're probably too intelligent.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like the kind of thing I would do.
Yeah, a guy came back to just tell everyone. A guy came back from Thailand with a bottle of like snake whiskey, so like a bottle of whiskey with a preserved snake in it.
Mm.
So we drank all the whiskey, and then a few of us who were left had the bright idea to break open the bottle, start a little bonfire, and cook the snake over the fire, and then we all ate it together.
Yeah, great.
And then
great
we were
idea.
sick for about a week.
Yeah, I don't know why you think that would be a good idea.
I just wanted to eat snake.
I guess.
But yeah, no, it was definitely a big Pikachu face moment the next morning when we were all shitting our guts out.
Yeah, good stuff. So we've got a new discussion question, Elliot. What would go with all these great foods that we've heard about today? Why, a nice refreshing drink, of course.
Yeah, so we're asking, what would you use the drink refill machine for? So we obviously saw Snowdrop use it for what I would say is a pretty boring and obvious thing to use it for, which is just to heal your friends. What are some creative uses for it?
Yeah, what's a cooler idea for... Yeah, would it bring the snake back if it refilled the snake whiskey bottle? It would get the whiskey for sure, but would it get the snake back? That's the question. But yeah, so that our new discussion question, you can find the place to answer that is our discussion thread linked in the show notes down below. So definitely check that out and answer that. You can also find links to all the other things that we mentioned, like the power predictor form and all that jazz.
Yes. You can also see us on our website, doofmedia.com, and you won't just see us there, you'll see all the other great shows on the Doof Network. More importantly, you will see the details for the fan art contest. Which we talked about before, and you should enter. Even if you don't have artistic talent, don't let that stop you.
Yeah,
you might surprise yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you find the information for that on the Doof Media website, doofmedia.com, where you can also find the Discord, doofmedia.com/discord. And you can also find links to become a Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yeah, and normally we would plug a Doof show here, but I'm gonna to pull a sneaky, not necessarily mention a Doof podcast, but if in case anybody has missed it, there was a Twig podcast that was announced. I want to say 2 days ago, called Twigging onto Twig. There's details about that on the subreddit. They also have a channel on the Doof Discord, so that's another handy place. Let's plug ourselves in there a little bit. So you can chat to the host there and see all the details on our Discord. But yeah, I'm excited. Finally, I might get around to reading Twig.
Yeah, finally. But yeah, so you can check that out. If you head into the Discord, there's a place to discuss it and all that jazz. But yeah, you can support what we're doing on Patreon or support what Wildbow's doing. Now that we know that Avery is alive, you can feel very happy to support Wildbow again and not condone potential Avery death by going to patreon.com/Wildbow.
Yeah. I mean, just think, next week we're not going to be able to make Avery's dead jokes anymore. And that's a shame.
It's going to be really sad.
This was the chapter where Avery's dead jokes died.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Tragic. Anywho.
See you, everybody.
See you, folks.